My name is Haley and I'm in my 30s. I'm an OB/GYN at a general hospital and I love the ever-changing nature of this job. The moment I deliver a new life into the world, I feel the greatest sense of accomplishment. I'm still relatively new to the field, so I often work night shifts. I couldn't do it without the understanding of my husband, Ethan, whom I've been married to for 5 years. We were introduced by a mutual friend and bonded over our shared love for splatter films. It was a relief to find someone who understood this rather unusual hobby of mine. Oh, you're a doctor? Though I'm still a beginner, you know. Being a doctor, isn't every day like a splatter film for you? I don't have time to think about it like that. I said, and Ethan looked at me quizzically, replying, I see. Movies and reality are different. In fact, it would be pretty messed up if I felt like my work was exactly like a splatter movie. When we have days off together, we spend our time watching movies just like always. When I'm busy, Ethan takes care of the household chores and is always there to lend an ear. He's the best partner I could ask for. This movie is kinda meh, isn't it? The reviews aren't great either, I said, leaning against Ethan's shoulder, a gesture I loved. Ethan in turn would rest his head on mine. Ethan was understanding of my work, never complaining even when I had to stay overnight at the hospital for days on end. He was a truly supportive presence, but there was one thing that bothered me, the subject of children. Because of my job, I was constantly around newborns, which made me want a child of my own even more. Now that I was in my 30s, I felt a growing urgency to have a child. But Ethan always said things like, we don't need kids yet. You keep saying yet, but my job is my priority right now, he would say with a smile. Didn't Ethan realize there's a time limit when it comes to having children? Childbirth isn't the goal, it's the starting line. That's why I wanted to get started sooner rather than later. I couldn't hide my disappointment. We need to talk about this seriously, I said, but Ethan wouldn't drop his smile, simply relying it would be a problem if we had a kid right now, wouldn't it? This wasn't even a conversation. I began to think that Ethan was avoiding the topic because I was too busy with work to make him see it as a real issue. It was time to start thinking about the future. I was contemplating whether to continue working at the general hospital or pursue a different path. This was all for the sake of my future with Ethan. If Ethan wouldn't face the issue, I would have to create the time for us to do so. With my current work schedule, having a child seemed impossible. I needed a catalyst, a reason to make a change. A few weeks after I started having these concerns, I received a call on my smartphone. It was from Dr. Logan, a senior doctor at the general hospital. I recently opened a urology and OB/GYN clinic near the Grand Central Station. The location is great, so I'm always busy, he said with a laugh. Meeting him after a while, I noticed that Logan seemed more relaxed than when we worked together at the general hospital. Perhaps the atmosphere at the general hospital had been more tense than I realized. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about my future lately, I said, idly poking at the ice in my glass with a straw. Logan looked surprised. Oh, really? He placed his teacup back on its saucer and rested his chin in his hand. Actually, I was thinking of inviting you to join my practice, he said, wearing a slightly troubled expression. I was taken aback and stared at him. Inviting me, I blurted out. Logan chuckled. Yes, you. We're a bit short-staffed in the OB/GYN department. Oh, really? I said, surprised, but also sensing a potential opportunity. Although Logan's clinic was known as an OB/GYN, they didn't handle deliveries. They mainly dealt with early-stage pregnancies and gynecological consultations. I thought that working at Logan's clinic might give Ethan and me more time together. You don't have to give me an answer right away, he said as he left. It was my day off, so I started making dinner while waiting for Ethan. Since I had some time, I decided to make beef stew, one of Ethan's favorites. I thought about bringing up the job situation with Ethan as I simmered beef. But even after his usual return time, Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he was caught up with work. I sighed and checked my phone. Just then, a message from Ethan popped up. What? I exclaimed despite being alone. Ethan's message simply said he'd be late because of work. I couldn't help but feel frustrated. A little heads up would have been nice. But then I realized I often did the same thing, sometimes not coming home at all. On those nights, Ethan would usually make dinner for me. I was struck by my own selfishness and realized that things couldn't go on like this. We were a married couple, but we were seriously lacking time together. We barely had any meaningful conversations lately. It was clear as day. I made up my mind to resign from the general hospital. Ethan finally came home close to midnight, slightly tipsy. Oh, Haley, you're home early. I'm off today, I said, handing him a glass of water, feeling a pang of guilt. Had I made him feel this way? Yeah, you're always coming home so late. Ethan's words hit me hard. That's when I knew for sure. I'm thinking of quitting my job, I said to Ethan's back. That's fine, if that's what you want, Haley, he said with a smile, looking at me. He seemed to be in a good mood, maybe because he was tipsy. I was relieved, thinking Ethan would understand. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I watched him walk to the bathroom. At least I was able to talk to him about it. I'd confirm with him in the morning, just in case he forgot. He was quite drunk after all. With that in mind, I transferred the beef stew into a Tupperware container. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a terrible hangover. Ugh, my head hurts. Did you drink that much? You didn't seem that drunk when you got home. Ethan took some painkillers and sat down at the table. Sorry, I can't eat breakfast today. Okay, I understand, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee while glancing at Ethan. Do you remember what I said yesterday? Yesterday? Oh yeah, I remember, he said, his face slightly tense. I sighed, thinking his hangover must be really bad. Of course, I remember clearly, he added, almost as if to reassure me. I nodded. I'll talk to my boss today, I said with a smile. Yeah, but it's still up in the air, right? He said, gulping down some water. I left for work before Ethan, pondering how to approach my boss about my resignation during the train ride. I figured being honest and direct would be the best approach. I would explain my desire to have children and prioritize our time as a couple. My boss, surprisingly, was understanding. Yeah, I get it. Family is important, he said. I ended up giving 2 months' notice. Staff shortages were a common issue, and since I wasn't leaving because I disliked my job, the 2-month period seemed reasonable. After talking to my boss, I immediately contacted Logan. He was surprised by my swift decision. Really? That was fast, he said, chuckling over the phone. I informed him about my 2 months' notice, and he said he would make the necessary arrangements on his end. I hoped things would start looking up, especially in my relationship with Ethan. We hadn't been seeing eye to eye lately, and I wanted to change that. I threw myself into work with renewed determination. The next 2 months flew by faster than I could have ever imagined. On my last day, my boss gave me a small bouquet of flowers. We'll miss you. If you ever want to come back, you're always welcome, he said with a smile that seemed genuine. His words made me feel like I had done a good job. Thank you for everything, I said, bowing my head. I gathered the remaining items from my locker. I remembered the excitement I felt when I first came to this hospital as an intern. The thrill of knowing I would continue working here as a fully fledged doctor was still vivid in my memory. The doctors here were all highly skilled specialists. If anything happened, this would be the place I'd want to be a patient in myself. I had my ups and downs, but this place had helped me grow. I closed my locker and bowed my head once more. It wasn't all fond memories. I can't count the number of times I wanted to quit. But I was moving on to the next stage of my life. I couldn't dwell on the past forever. With a renewed sense of determination, I left the hospital. I had arranged to start working at Logan's clinic a week from my last day at the hospital. I decided to use this week to get things in order at home. My plan was to tackle all the cleaning I hadn't been able to do regularly. I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of cleaning supplies, determined to scrub every nook and cranny of our apartment. By the time I was done, the place was sparkling clean. Wow, it's really clean now. I realized it was almost time for Ethan to come home. I hadn't even started preparing dinner. I was in a dilemma. I texted Ethan asking if he was okay with takeout from a local deli. I left the apartment and headed to the deli. The air had a slight chill of autumn, making me feel a bit cold. Just then, I received a message from Ethan. He said he would be late again because of work. I couldn't help but wonder if this was happening too often. Was he having an affair? Is he cheating on me? I muttered to myself, looking at my phone. I decided to buy food just for myself and hurried to the deli. That night, Ethan came home late again. You're still awake? You could have gone to bed already. Yeah, but I couldn't fall asleep. Ethan tilted his head at my curt response and headed to the bathroom. He seemed to sense something was wrong, but he didn't address it. It was obvious I was unhappy, but he wouldn't even initiate a conversation. This was no different from before I quit my job. I knew he was busy with work, but I couldn't suppress my feelings anymore. The fact that I couldn't even talk to him directly about it made me even more uneasy. How could I possibly ask him why when he came home late after work? And to tell him to turn his attention to me was out of the question. After all, I was the one who had prioritized work all this time. As I grappled with these thoughts, 4 out of the 7 days that week, Ethan came home late. This was excessive, wasn't it? Did regular office workers have this much overtime? In a time where work-life balance was being advocated for, this seemed unacceptable. A new guy messed up at work and I had to clean up his mess. That's why I've been coming home so late, he said, scratching his head and chuckling, but there was no hint of dishonesty in his expression. Oh, I see. That must be tough. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself, okay? I said, nodding in understanding. I spent the week with a mix of complicated emotions. My life with Ethan remained a series of missed connections. Even when he did come home early, he would often fall asleep on the living room sofa. The frustration of not being able to talk to him gnawed at me. But time, indifferent to my feelings, marched on. The week passed by quickly, perhaps too quickly. In a fit of frustration, I had ended up polishing every corner of our apartment to shine. This wasn't how I planned things, I muttered, doing my makeup in the now spotless bathroom. Today was my first day at Logan's clinic. As I rode the train, I contemplated the future. What would happen after I started working at Logan's clinic? Would Ethan finally start communicating with me? Lost in thought, I arrived at my new workplace. The clinic was in a tall, modern building that made me look up in awe. I heard that Logan owned the entire building. Wow, Dr. Logan is really something. Logan's clinic occupied the second floor of a 3-story building. It was indeed on a busy street, which meant it would likely be bustling, but I wondered if I could adapt. With these concerns swirling in my mind, I opened the door to Logan's clinic. The clinic was modern and inviting, with a calming color scheme that immediately put me at ease. This is lovely, I thought as I walked in, noticing the reception desk right away. Logan had told me to give my name at the reception. Excuse me, I said, and the receptionist, a strikingly beautiful woman, looked up. I couldn't help but stare for a moment. The receptionist looked at me with a puzzled expression. I'm sorry, we're not open yet, she said, just as Logan appeared from the back. Ah, Haley. Good morning, he said with a refreshing smile. Seeing his face, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. After greeting the receptionist, I was shown to my office. The clinic was brand new, so all the equipment was state-of-the-art. The pristine white floors and blue walls were particularly eye-catching. I heard that they had the latest medical technology, which was probably why they were fully booked. For today, I'll have you see walk-in patients. Okay, understood, I replied. Logan placed a hand on my shoulder. Hey, smile. If you look that tense, you'll scare the patients away, he said with a chuckle. It seemed my nervousness was evident on my face. I patted my cheeks, trying to relax, reminding myself that I needed to pull myself together. The clinic hours started and it was surprisingly busy. The general hospital was hectic too, but the pace at a private clinic was quite intense. Before I knew it, my first day was over. I was exhausted, but I felt a sense of fulfillment. How was your first day? I felt like it was over in the blink of an eye, I said, accepting a can of coffee from Logan. First days can be nerve-wracking. You'll get used to it, he said, offering words of encouragement. I stopped by the supermarket on my way home, wondering if I should ask Ethan if he would be home early. I received a text from him almost immediately saying he would be home for dinner. I felt a surge of happiness and bought 2 steaks. I was determined to have a proper conversation with Ethan tonight. With that in mind, I left the supermarket and headed back to our apartment to start dinner preparations. Coming home from work and making dinner, it felt like a scene from a suburban dream. I was finally going to face Ethan and talk things through. This thought made cooking enjoyable. I finished the prep work and checked my phone. What? I saw a message from Ethan that had come in just a few minutes ago. I had asked him to let me know when he was on his way, so I thought it was about that. But the message was far from what I expected. It read, "Sorry, I'm going to be late again." The disappointment I felt was indescribable. I knew it was because of work, but he had just told me he'd be home early. The feeling of being let down was overwhelming. When did I become so selfish? I put the uncooked steaks in the fridge, feeling my appetite vanish. I decided to go to bed early since I had work the next day. When I woke up, Ethan was in bed next to me. The clock showed it was past midnight. He had come home late again. I sighed and went back to sleep. The next morning, Ethan was in the kitchen, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry about last night. It's okay. It was work, right?" I said, but I couldn't bring myself to accept his apology. The feeling of betrayal was too strong. Sorry, I have to head out early today, he said. I lied and said I had to leave early too, and left the apartment. I arrived at the station earlier than expected and decided to kill some time at a nearby Starbucks. I wondered what I was so anxious about. Was it about having children? Or was it because Ethan and I couldn't have a heart-to-heart conversation? I couldn't find the answer. My once warm coffee had turned completely cold. I gulped down the cold coffee and left the cafe. It was 8 a.m., meaning I had spent about an hour there. I headed straight to the clinic. I greeted the beautiful receptionist and went to my office. Good morning, Dr. Logan. Good morning, Haley. Remember, a smile can make a big difference, he said, flashing a smile. After a brief meeting, the clinic opened for the day. I was assigned to handle walk-in patients. The next patient was a woman in her 20s named Tiffany Hill. The nurse ushered Tiffany into the examination room. Nice to meet you, Tiffany said in a sweet voice. She was the type of woman I didn't particularly get along with, but really sweet and girly. Her brown curled hair added to her girly image. I couldn't help but think a miniskirt was an odd choice for a gynecologist appointment. Please, have a seat over there, I said, and the door behind me opened. I was startled. It was rare to have someone accompany a patient during a gynecological exam. I started to say something, but the male companion spoke first. Sorry. I was just getting her bag and got a little delayed. The voice sounded familiar, and so did his physique. My mind started racing. Was this man my husband? But Ethan didn't seem to recognize me, probably because I was wearing a mask. I decided to stay calm and focus on my job. I looked at the electronic medical record. Tiffany was complaining of general physical discomfort and had a history of severe menstrual cramps. I'll need to conduct an examination, so I'll ask the gentleman to please wait outside, I said, ushering Ethan out of the room. My heart was pounding. Was this woman my husband's mistress? The thought made me want to lose it, but I had to maintain my composure as a doctor. It was a struggle between my emotions and my professional duty. During the examination, Tiffany suddenly blurted out, "He has a wife, you know." I was so shocked that I dropped my instrument. "Is everything okay?" I heard Ethan ask from behind the curtain. Yes, I'm fine," I said, quickly continuing with the examination. "Does that mean he's cheating on her?" I asked. "It's not like that. It's just a matter of who met him first," Tiffany said with a laugh. What was she talking about? If the person was married, it was cheating, no matter how you phrased it. I managed to contain my anger. "I see," I simply said, finishing the examination. After getting dressed, Tiffany went to the waiting room. "Ethan," she called out. There was no doubt about it now. That goofy face belonged to my husband. I wanted to scream, to expose him right then and there. What kind of face would he make? But I couldn't embarrass myself like that in public. I took a deep breath and turned to face Tiffany and Ethan. "Is the examination over?" Ethan asked, sticking his head into the room. I wanted to tell him that his wife was standing right before him. There are no abnormalities. I'll prescribe some painkillers for when the pain is severe," I said. Tiffany poked Ethan's arm. What was she doing? Ethan, with a sly smile, asked me a question. "I have a question for the doctor." "Yes," I replied, smiling, though I had questions of my own. "Are there any procedures to prevent having children?" The moment he said that, I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands were ice cold, and I was probably as pale as a ghost. The nurse next to me looked at me with concern. What did Ethan just say? He wanted a procedure to prevent having children while I had been longing for one. I felt like I was going to collapse, but then a thought struck me. This could be my chance for revenge. I lifted my head. "Yes, there are," I said with a smile. I wanted to add, "But have you discussed this with your wife? Your wife who is standing right in front of you and who wants to have children with you?" But I held back. I glanced at Ethan. He was looking at Tiffany and said, "I don't plan on having children with her." Her? So he admitted it. I maintained my smile and continued discussing the procedure. "Yes, the procedure for men is less invasive than for women," I explained. "I'd like to make an appointment," he said with a smile. At that moment, any remaining attachment I had to him vanished. I decided then and there I was going to divorce him. And since his mistress was right there, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. "All right, we'll need to do some preliminary tests. Please head to the examination room," I said, instructing the nurse to guide him. To my surprise, Tiffany followed him to the examination room. "Your wife said she doesn't want kids either, right?" "Yeah, just drop it, okay?" They whispered to each other. I could hear everything they were saying. I prepared the largest syringe I could find and drew Ethan's blood. Whoa, that's a big needle just for a blood test. Is the actual procedure going to be easier than this? He said, trying to act tough, but he fainted from a fear of needles right after the blood draw. Ethan! I had the nurse prepare a bed and instructed them to let him rest for a while. Ethan was terrified of needles, so I knew he was probably trying to act brave in front of Tiffany. A few minutes later, I went to check on Ethan. He was pale, and Tiffany was holding his hand tightly. It was like a scene out of a bad romance movie. Doctor, is he going to be okay? Yes, he'll be fine. It's just a vasovagal syncope from the needle. He just needs to rest. I scheduled his procedure. Please note that there will be a cancellation fee. I informed him. Ethan, still looking unwell, left the clinic. Logan, having heard about a patient fainting, came to my office. Everything okay? I heard someone fainted. Yes, it was my husband. What? Logan said, looking utterly bewildered. I'm sure I had the same expression when I first encountered the situation. I explained everything to Logan, feeling a headache coming on. I'm sorry, Dr. Logan. I scheduled the next appointment under your name. Well, male sterilization procedures fall under my specialty, so it's fine. Technically, the procedure to make men infertile is not a gynecological procedure, but a urological one. Since Dr. Logan's clinic handled both specialties, there was no issue, and the examination rooms were the same. I knew this, which was why I had the blood drawn in the first place. Ugh, that's quite a story. I apologize. Oh, I have an idea. It wouldn't sit right with me to let him get away with this. I'll back you up, he said with his usual smile, but it was clear he was plotting something. When I got home that day, Ethan was already there. I was going to be out, so I came straight home instead, he said with a smile. I wanted to retort, you mean you had a date, not that you were going to be out, right? But the time for revenge hadn't come yet. I see. Welcome back. I already started the bath. It seemed like he was actively doing chores, maybe because he had been meeting his mistress so often. I realized his frequent late returns were due to meeting up with his mistress. The thought made me feel completely indifferent towards Ethan. I used to tear up at the mere thought of it, but now, knowing everything, I felt nothing. Perhaps Ethan never intended to communicate with me in the first place. This realization brought a sense of clarity. 2 months later, on the day of the scheduled procedure, Ethan showed up as planned. It was a good thing that he came, but it also signified his choice to not have children with me. Well, I didn't want to have his child anymore either. Ethan changed into the surgical gown and entered the operating room. Shall we begin? Logan asked me, inviting me into the operating room as an assistant. Please state your name. Ethan Smith. To confirm, we will be performing a vasectomy, a procedure that will prevent you from being able to have children in the future. Have you discussed this thoroughly with your partner? My wife and I have already agreed that we don't want children, so it's fine. Logan glanced at me, and I looked back at him, nodding. I'll make sure you're 100% infertile. Huh? Ethan looked at me, surprised as I removed my mask, revealing my identity as the assistant. He stammered, unable to form words. Why are you here? This is my new workplace, I informed him, even though I had told him about quitting the general hospital. He probably wasn't listening, as usual. I watched him, feeling utterly exasperated. I want to cancel the procedure, he exclaimed. In that case, please pay the cancellation fee at the reception, I said. Ethan quickly changed and left. As I expected, Tiffany's voice echoed from the reception area. She had come along again. I suppressed my irritation and headed to the reception. What is the meaning of this? Why is this cancellation fee so high? He was shouting. The cancellation fee for the day of the procedure was $1,000, as clearly stated in the terms and conditions. Though that was only for Ethan's document. Stop it, you're embarrassing yourself in public, I chided him. Ethan turned bright red. This gold digger. She's the reason you don't want kids with me. Is this your wife? They both said simultaneously. I was slightly dumbfounded by the two. What a pair. You can leave me if you want to. Did you hear that, Ethan? Pay the cancellation fee already, Tiffany said gleefully upon hearing my response. Sorry, can you pay for me? I usually use cashless payment. Oh, alright then. Tiffany paid the cancellation fee. We'll talk later, I told Ethan, and he glared at me before leaving. After the commotion, Ethan didn't return home. Perhaps he was afraid to face me. Instead, Tiffany came to my apartment. She was apparently pregnant. It's your husband's child. I see. Congratulations, I said plainly and sent her away. How could she show her face to me after all that had happened? In a way, she has some nerve. After Tiffany's pregnancy was revealed, Ethan came to our apartment. But the locks had been changed, so he couldn't get in. A neighbor saw him and, thinking he was a suspicious person, called the police. He was reportedly shouting, "I'm her husband," as he was being taken to the police station. It seemed that Tiffany, in her excitement over the pregnancy, had revealed her relationship with Ethan at their workplace. This caused a huge uproar at the company. Ethan's affair was seen as a problem by the higher-ups, especially since he was considered a rising star. As a result, he was demoted and transferred to a rural branch. I hired a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce. I also filed for compensation from Tiffany for emotional distress. Tiffany then appeared before me again, this time on a main street. "I'm pregnant, you know, and you're suing me for compensation?" she yelled. "Huh?" I simply responded. "Do you even know Ethan? He doesn't have any money," she exclaimed. It was true that Ethan worked for a well-known company, but he was bad with money, and when we got married, he had more debt than savings. He was probably still continuing his extravagant spending habits. I had been covering for him by working. Ethan had nothing left, only negatives. Tiffany probably thought she could live a good life with Ethan, who was a rising star in the same company. He always wore designer suits, but 2 of those suits were bought by me, and the other 2 were fully financed. I recalled these things and asked Tiffany, "Aren't you embarrassed shouting such things in public?" "Huh?" She seemed to realize where she was only after I pointed it out. Logan's clinic was located on a busy street in front of the train station. To expose one's embarrassing situation in such a public space. She really wasn't very bright. I thought to myself as I stared at Tiffany. If a girl like her could ensnare Ethan, maybe he wasn't such a great guy after all. I started to doubt my own judgment in men. The divorce was finalized through our lawyers. Ethan apparently kept insisting he didn't want a divorce until the very end. But I had no regrets. I should have done this sooner. I started to think that maybe the reason we couldn't have children was a premonition of all this. It felt that way now. After that, my lawyer told me more about what happened. Ethan was transferred to the countryside, and Tiffany, finding it difficult to stay at the company, resigned. Of course she would. She was the one who exposed her own affair after all. It was only natural she'd find it hard to stay. A few months later, I heard that a baby boy was born. The child was born safely, but it seemed like Tiffany ran away from home, unable to handle the stress of child rearing. Well, she didn't seem like she wanted kids, and neither did Ethan, to be honest. It sounded like they were in a tough spot. Rumor had it that Ethan's extravagant spending habits had resurfaced, and he was struggling to pay off his debts. Apparently, Tiffany was also quite the spender, and she left those debts to Ethan. Paying off debts for 2 would be quite a challenge. Plus, debt collectors were reportedly loitering around his house. I wondered where he borrowed money from in this day and age. It seemed unlikely he could rely on his family. Well, it wasn't my problem anymore since I was no longer involved. But then, out of the blue, Ethan, who was saddled with childcare, contacted me. "You wanted kids, right? I can let you experience raising one," he said on the phone in a way that completely baffled me. He suggested that if it were the 2 of us, we could raise the child without financial worries. But the without financial worries part was thanks to my income, wasn't it? And let me experience raising one? What was with that condescending tone? I might as well get a puppy. It would be more rewarding. He seemed to be implying that he wanted me to help him raise the child. The sheer absurdity of it left me speechless for a moment. No way, that's absolutely impossible. Why would I do that? Come on, we were married once. Help me out here. And you're the one who destroyed that marriage. Don't ever contact me again, I said, and he didn't respond after that. I hung up, feeling exasperated. What was Ethan thinking? No, he probably wasn't thinking at all. That man was always so impulsive. I sighed and deleted Ethan's contact information. I didn't need it anymore. Actually, I had a new development in my life too. I was getting remarried next week, and the person I was marrying was none other than Logan. As we worked together, we discovered many common interests and started dating. It turned out Logan was also a fan of indie movies, including splatter films, and he knew even more about them than I did. I was amazed to find someone with such similar tastes so close to me. And now I was carrying a new life inside me, my own child, something I had almost given up on. I was surprised at how happy I felt about the pregnancy. I planned to give birth at the general hospital where I used to work. I was familiar with many of the staff there, and I trusted their skills, so I felt at ease. I was filled with a mix of joy and anxiety, but with Logan by my side, I believed everything would be alright. I was taking a step forward into a new future, filled with hope and anticipation for what was to come with my new partner and our growing family. The challenges of the past had only strengthened my resolve, and I was ready to embrace all the joys and responsibilities that lay ahead. With Logan, I envisioned a future where we could share our passions, support each other's dreams, and create a loving and nurturing environment for our child. The pain and disappointment of my previous marriage had faded into the background, replaced by the bright promise of a fresh start and a love that felt true and deep. I cherished the thought of our little family. We would build a life filled with happiness, laughter, and endless love. As I looked forward to our wedding day, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that I had found my true partner and that our journey together was just beginning. The future was ours to create, and I was excited to see what beautiful moments and cherished memories awaited us in this new chapter of our lives.